In the shadowed underbelly of Los Angeles Koreatown, where neon signs flickered like dying stars against the perpetual haze of streetlights, Ji-hoon Kang moved through the night like a ghost in a tailored suit. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling bulgogi from late-night vendors and the faint acrid tang of exhaust from idling black sedans. At 42, Ji-hoon was the unchallenged kingpin of the Hanseong Syndicate, a network built on smuggling routes from Busan to the ports of Long Beach, layered with legitimate fronts like import-export firms and high-end restaurants. His world was one of calculated risks. Debts collected in whispers, rivals silenced before they spoke, but tonight he sought something simpler. To settle a wage for a quiet accountant who'd proven her worth without asking questions. Ilara Voss had come to his attention 6 months earlier, recommended by a trusted lieutenant for her precision with numbers. No family ties, no prying eyes, just a sharp mind and a modest apartment above a laundromat on Western Avenue. Ji-hoon paid well for discretion, and Ilara's ledgers had balanced his shadowy operations flawlessly. Shipping manifests scrubbed of anomalies, discreet accounts funneling profits into offshore shells. But whispers in his inner circle suggested she was fraying at the edges, late nights poring over books that didn't add up to her modest life. Tonight, under the guise of a routine payout, he'd gauge her loyalty himself. In his line of work, even the smallest crack could invite a flood. The sedan pulled up to the curb outside her building at 11:47 p.m., its engine a low purr that blended with the distant hum of the city's undercurrent. Ji-hoon stepped out, flanked by 2 enforcers in unmarked jackets, their eyes scanning the alleyways. The laundromat's windows glowed faintly, steam curling from vents like cigarette smoke. He nodded to them, "Wait here," and ascended the exterior stairs alone, envelope of cash crisp in his pocket. The door to her unit was ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the hall, accompanied by soft, mewling sounds that didn't belong in a place of solitude. He pushed the door open without knocking. His instincts honed from years of unannounced visits to debtors and defectors. The apartment was a stark contrast to the opulence of his penthouse overlooking the Hollywood Hills. Threadbare couch, stacks of financial journals on a wobbly table, and the faint smell of instant ramen mingling with something earthier, wet fur and milk. Ilara knelt on the linoleum floor in the kitchenette. Her dark hair tied back in a hasty ponytail, sleeves rolled up on a faded blouse. She wasn't at her desk crunching numbers. Instead, she cradled a saucer of what looked like canned tuna, coaxing a litter of scrawny kittens toward it. 5 of them, no more than a few weeks old, their eyes barely open, tumbling over each other in a frenzy of tiny paws and plaintive cries. "They're strays from the dumpster behind the market," she murmured without looking up, her voice steady but laced with exhaustion. "Found them this morning. Mama must have been hit by a car. Too many drivers speeding through here at night." One kitten latched onto the food, its siblings nudging closer, and Ilara's expression softened in a way that caught Ji-hoon off guard. This was the woman whose spreadsheets had rerouted millions through layered corporations, evading IRS audits and rival audits alike, feeding alley cats in a one-bedroom that smelled of desperation. Ji-hoon cleared his throat, stepping fully inside and closing the door behind him. The floorboards creaked under his polished shoes. "Miss Voss, I didn't expect this." He held up the envelope. Its thickness a silent promise of the $5,000 inside, her quarterly bonus, plus a discretionary tip for the late hours. But now, watching her gently separate 2 fighting kittens with a fingertip, he felt an unfamiliar pull. In his world, vulnerability was a liability, yet here she was, exposing it without fear. Ilara finally glanced up. Her green eyes, unusual for someone of her mixed heritage, widening slightly in surprise, then narrowing in assessment. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, rising to her feet with the grace of someone used to holding her ground. "Mr. Kang, you're early. Or is this one of those surprise inspections your people mentioned?" Her tone was polite, but there was an edge, a subtle challenge, born from months of handling his coded ledgers, entries marked with innocuous terms like fish imports that hid shipments of contraband electronics, and worse. He placed the envelope on the counter, his gaze flicking to the kittens. One bold grey one ventured toward his shoe, sniffing curiously before darting back. "Just settling accounts. You've been invaluable. But I hear you've been working overtime on the Wilshire Docks manifests. Anything I should know?" It was a probe, casual but pointed. The docks were a pressure point, rival triad factions circling, trying to muscle in on his routes. If she slipped, it could cost lives. Ilara hesitated, her fingers lingering on the saucer. The room fell quiet save for the kitten's soft lapping and the distant wail of a siren echoing off the buildings. Everything balances as always, but the guard rotations at the warehouse, they've changed. New faces, unmarked vans lingering after hours. I flagged it in the notes. She met his eyes steadily, no tremor. Gratitude? No. This was duty, laced with a moral compass he hadn't anticipated. In his syndicate, loyalty was bought. Hers seemed woven into something deeper, like the care she lavished on these helpless creatures. Ji-hoon nodded, pocketing his hands to mask the intrigue stirring within. He'd come to pay wages, to reinforce control, but this glimpse into her world, raw, unarmored, shifted the ground beneath him. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed in his jacket, a text from his lieutenant. "Unidentified tail on Western, 2 blocks back. Abort? Surveillance? Or coincidence in a city that never slept?" He glanced back at Ilara, now scooping a kitten into a makeshift box lined with old towels. "Be careful out there, Miss Voss. Not everything stray deserves saving." She didn't respond immediately, but as the door clicked shut behind him, Ji-hoon wondered if he'd just invited a complication into his carefully guarded empire, one with claws sharper than any rival's blade. Down on the street, his enforcers tensed, eyes on the rearview mirror. But the real question lingered. Who was watching her and why now? Ji-hoon slid into the back seat of the sedan, the leather creaking under his weight as the door sealed with a solid thunk. The night air clung to his suit, carrying the faint metallic bite of impending rain from the east. "Drive," he said to the driver, his voice low and even, but his eyes were already on the side mirror, tracing the shadowed street behind them. The enforcers in the front exchanged a glance, silent, practiced, before the engine growled to life, pulling them away from the laundromat's steaming glow. 2 blocks down Western, the tail materialized, a nondescript grey SUV, its headlights dimmed just enough to blend with the late-night traffic. Not amateur work. The driver kept a consistent gap, weaving through the sparse flow of taxis and delivery vans without aggression. Ji-hoon tapped his phone, pulling up the secure app linked to his network's cameras, grainy feeds from corner stores and traffic cams stitching together a patchwork view. There, the SUV's plate, partially obscured but enough for a reverse lookup. Registered to a Shell rental in Echo Park. No priors, but that meant nothing. Clean vehicles were the hallmark of pros. "Circle back on Olympic," he instructed, leaning forward. "Flush them if they follow." The driver nodded, turning sharply into a side street lined with shuttered taquerias, their awnings sagging under the weight of old rain. The SUV hesitated at the intersection, then mirrored the move. A confirmation. Ji-hoon's mind raced through possibilities. Triads probing his outskirts, or a federal task force sniffing too close to the docks. But Ilara Voss didn't fit the profile for a leak. Her ledgers were airtight, her life a closed book until those damn kittens. Vulnerability like that could be a lure, or genuine, a crack in the armor of a woman who'd balanced his empire's shadows without flinching. By the time they looped onto Wilshire Boulevard, the tail had peeled off, vanishing into the sprawl of high-rises and blinking crosswalks. Ji-hoon exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The dashboard clock read 12:13 a.m. His penthouse waited. A fortress of glass and steel with views of the glittering basin below. But sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford tonight. He dialed his lieutenant, Min-jun, the line crackling faintly over the encrypted signal. Run that plate. And pull everything on Voss, background, associates, the works, quietly. Min-jun's response was clipped, efficient. On it, boss. You think she's the reason for the shadow? Not sure yet, but someone's interested. Make sure her building's covered. Discreet watch, no contact. Ji-hoon ended the call, staring out at the sodium-lit blur of the city. Ilara's face lingered in his thoughts, those green eyes assessing him like he was just another unbalanced account. In his world, trust was a transaction, paid in blood or cash. Yet she'd flagged the dock inconsistencies without prompting, her notes a subtle warning wrapped in numbers. Loyalty or leverage. Across town, Ilara locked her apartment door with a double turn, the deadbolt's click echoing in the quiet hall. The kittens mewled from their box on the counter, a chorus of need that grounded her amid the adrenaline spike from Ji-hoon's visit. She wasn't naive. His wage payment had felt like more, an evaluation perhaps after the overtime on those manifests. The envelope sat unopened beside the saucer, its bulk a reminder of the web she navigated. $5 grand could cover rent for months. By proper formula for the litter, maybe even a vet check. But touching it meant deeper ties to the man whose operations she'd sanitized for half a year. She scooped the grey kitten, the bold one that had sniffed at Ji-hoon's shoe, into her palm, its tiny heart thumping against her skin. The apartment felt smaller now. The walls pressing in with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of a freight train from the rail yards. Why him tonight? Routine, he'd said, but his eyes had lingered on the kittens, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Curiosity, pity. In Koreatown's undercurrents, men like Kang didn't show softness without purpose. Her phone buzzed on the table, a burner. One of two she kept for work. The screen lit with a text from an unknown number. Good work on the docks. But watch your back. Eyes everywhere. No signature, just that. Ilara's pulse quickened. It wasn't from Ji-hoon. His style was direct in person. She deleted it, then powered off the device, slipping it into a drawer with the others. Paranoia was part of the job, but this felt pointed. Like the note she'd left in his files about the new guards. Had someone else seen it? A rival accountant, or worse, an inside play? Downstairs, the laundromat's dryer thumped to a stop and she peered through the blinds. The street looked empty. Empty enough. A black sedan idled at the corner, too sleek for a regular, its exhaust curling like a question mark in the cooling air. Coincidence? Or the start of something? Ilara turned back to the kittens, pouring milk into a shallow dish, but her mind was already turning over the variables. Guard rotations shifted without notice, vans without plates, and now this message. If Ji-hoon's world was bleeding into hers, feeding strays might be the least of her worries. The next morning broke grey and drizzling, the rain pattering against Ilara's window like impatient fingers. She dressed in her usual armor, crisp blouse, slacks that hid the wear from too many late shifts, and headed to the coffee shop on the corner, the one with the steamed windows and the barista who never asked questions. Her laptop bag slung over her shoulder held the encrypted drive with the latest ledgers, but today she needed air. Distance from the apartment's confines. As she waited for her order, the bitter scent of espresso cutting through the damp, the door chimed, and Ji-hoon entered. No entourage this time, just him in a charcoal overcoat, shaking droplets from his hair. Their eyes met across the steam, and he approached with the measured stride of a man who owned the room without saying it. "Ms. Voss, coffee." He gestured to the counter, his voice carrying that faint accent, polished by years in L.A.'s sprawl. She straightened, surprise sharpening her reply. "Mr. Kang, twice in 12 hours. This about the envelope." He ordered 2 blacks, no sugar, and handed her one as the cup steamed on the pickup ledge. "Partly, and the tail last night. My people shook it, but it circled your block first." His gaze held hers, probing without pressure. "The message you got, burner text?" Ilara's grip tightened on the cup, heat seeping through the cardboard. How did he know? "You have my place bugged?" "Not yet, but I will, if it keeps you safe." He sipped, the rain drumming louder outside. "Those docs notes you flagged saved us a raid last week. Rivals testing fences. Come to my office today. We talk security, properly." It was an invitation laced with command, the pull of his world tugging at her autonomy. Curiosity burned. About the tale, the text, the man who paid in envelopes but watched like a hawk. Safety concerns weighed heavier. Alone, she was exposed. "Fine, but on my terms. No tails on me." Ji-hoon's nod was almost imperceptible, a ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. As they stepped into the drizzle, his driver pulled up curbside, the sedan's wipers slicing through the blur. But in the rear view, Ilara caught a flicker. A motorcycle idling too long at the light. Rider's helmet turned their way. Was it nothing, or the first thread unraveling? And if she stepped into his office, would the door lock behind her? The sedan sliced through the rain-slicked streets of Koreatown, wipers beating a rhythmic tattoo against the downpour that turned the world into a smeared watercolor of neon and shadow. Ilara sat in the back beside Ji-hoon, the leather seats cool and unyielding beneath her, carrying the faint scent of polished wood and his cologne. Sandalwood edged with something sharper like gun oil. The driver navigated with practiced ease, avoiding the clogged arteries of Wilshire for the quieter veins toward downtown, where Ji-hoon's operations blended into the skyline's anonymous towers. She kept her eyes on the side window, watching droplets race across the glass, but her mind catalogued the details. No partition between front and back, a deliberate choice to foster trust. The faint glow of a dashboard screen showing route deviations, and that motorcycle from the coffee shop, now lost in the spray, but etched in her memory. Ji-hoon broke the silence first, his voice a low rumble over the engine's hum. "The text, was it about the docks?" She turned to him, the steam from their coffees long dissipated, leaving only the bitter aftertaste on her tongue. "It mentioned good work there, warned about eyes. You didn't send it." His jaw tightened, a muscle flickering under the stubble-shadowed skin. "No, but it lines up with the tail. My network's clean on that end, but someone's feeding intel." He pulled out his phone, thumbing through a secure feed, grainy stills from a traffic cam near her building, time-stamped 11:50 p.m. the night before. The grey SUV idled, its driver a blurred silhouette, but the partial plate matched what his lieutenant had pulled. A rental tied to a ghost company in San Gabriel, fronts for low-level triad couriers. "This isn't random. Your notes on the guard rotations, did you share them with anyone?" Ilara shook her head, her fingers twisting the strap of her laptop bag. "Only in the files I sent you. And the burner texts go one way, no replies." The rain intensified, drumming on the roof like urgent Morse code, and she caught a whiff of wet asphalt seeping through the vents. Trust versus suspicion warred in her chest. His invitation could be protection or a cage closing. But the text had chilled her more than his unannounced visits. It implied eyes inside her routine, watching the accountant who balanced ledgers but fed kittens in the dead of night. The sedan pulled into an underground garage beneath a sleek high-rise on Figueroa Street, the kind of building that housed law firms by day and whispered deals after dark. Security lights bathed the concrete in harsh yellow, illuminating bollards and cameras that swiveled like watchful eyes. A guard at the barrier nodded to Ji-hoon, raising the arm without a word, and they descended into a sub-level reserved for his inner circle. Private elevators, biometric locks, the hum of generators underscoring the isolation. As the doors hissed open to a dimly lit foyer, Ilara's heels clicked on polished marble, the sound echoing off walls lined with abstract art that hid panic rooms. Ji-hoon's office occupied the top floor, a penthouse lair disguised as executive space, floor-to-ceiling windows fogged by rain, overlooking the sprawl where the Los Angeles River snaked like a dark vein through the city. The air inside was warmer, laced with the aroma of aged whiskey from a decanter on the desk and the subtle ozone of high-end servers whirring in an adjacent room. He gestured to a leather armchair opposite his, shedding his overcoat to reveal a crisp shirt rolled at the cuffs, forearms corded with the quiet strength of a man who'd enforced his own rules for decades. "Sit. We review the manifests together." She complied, unzipping her bag and sliding the drive across the glass-topped table. A wall screen flickered to life at his touch, pulling up encrypted files, shipping logs from the Wilshire docks, columns of data scrolling like a digital ledger of sins. "Here," she said, pointing to a highlighted row. 3 vans logged entry at 2 a.m. last week, no manifests attached. Guard rotations skipped the east gate by 15 minutes, enough for a handoff. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed, tracing the entries. The room felt smaller now, the rain a relentless patter against the glass, amplifying the tension. His code was ironclad, no innocence touched, debts settled with precision, not chaos. But rivals like the Triads played dirtier, smuggling not just electronics, but precursors for the streets, eroding his roots. Minjun's report says the new guards are vetted, but... He paused, zooming on a timestamp. An inconsistency. One van's plate mismatched the rental database by a digit. A human error or deliberate plant. This could be internal. Someone in my crew leaking to test loyalties. Ilara leaned forward, the chair's creak underscoring her unease. Or external pressure on me. That text knew about the notes before you did. Her independence chafed against the pull of his world, the possessiveness in his gaze. Not overt, but there, like a shadow lengthening. Gratitude for the wages warred with fear. She'd accepted the job for the pay, to escape student loans and a dead-end life, but now it entangled her in something visceral. A soft buzz interrupted. His intercom. Minjun's voice crackled through. "Boss! The plate's a dead end, burned after last night. But we've got movement. Unmarked drone spotted near the docks, low alt, could be surveillance gear." Ji-hoon's response was clipped. "Scramble a team, secure the warehouse." He stood, pacing to the window, the city lights blurring into halos through the rain. Turning back to her, his expression hardened with resolve, shaped by a past loss. A brother gunned down in a Busan warehouse betrayal, the scar that forged his restraint. "You're in this now, Ilara, not just ledgers. Stay here tonight, safe house level below. I'll handle the flush." She rose, heart pounding against her ribs, the kitten's mules echoing faintly in her mind, like a reminder of softer stakes. Autonomy screamed to leave, but the drone's shadow loomed, a credible threat organized and close. "On my terms, remember. I go with you. I flagged this, I see it through." A beat of silence, rain lashing the glass like applause. Ji-hoon's nod was reluctant, a vow unspoken in the dim light. But as they headed to the elevator, neither noticed the faint red blink from the air vent above. A camera lens, tampered or planted. Who had eyes inside his fortress, and what did they want with the woman feeding strays? If you're enjoying this story so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. The elevator hummed downward from Ji-hoon's penthouse office, its descent a controlled plunge into the building's underbelly, where the air grew cooler and carried the faint, oily tang of diesel from service ramps below. Elara stood shoulder to shoulder with him, the space between them charged like the static before a storm, her pulse sinking with the soft ding of passing floors. The red blink from the vent lingered in her mind, a telltale glitch in the fortress he'd built, or a deliberate eye. Ji-hoon's hand hovered near the emergency button, his body language a coiled spring, every sense attuned to the confined space. They emerged into a sub-level corridor, fluorescent strips buzzing overhead, casting long shadows on scuffed concrete walls reinforced with steel plating. This was the safe-house level, nondescript doors leading to stocked bunkers, medical kits, and escape tunnels snaking toward the adjacent parking structure. Min-jun waited at the end, his broad frame silhouetted against a reinforced door, tablet in hand glowing with real-time feeds from the docks. Rain still hammered the world above, a muffled roar filtering through vents, but down here it felt distant, like the city's pulse held at bay. "Boss," Min-jun said, voice gravelly from too many late nights. "Teams en route, 2 vans armed light. Drone signature matches commercial recon gear. Could be triad scouts mapping weak points." His eyes flicked to Elara, assessing without judgment, then back to Ji-hoon. "You two heading out?" Ji-hoon nodded curtly, keying a code into the door panel. It hissed open to reveal a dimly lit ops room. Banks of monitors flickering with camera grids, a table cluttered with burner phones and encrypted radios. The air thick with the hum of cooling fans and the sharp scent of fresh coffee from a percolator. First, the office. That vent. Check it now. He turned to Elara, his gaze steady, the possessiveness in it tempered by a rare vulnerability, shaped by the brother he'd lost to a similar blind spot years ago. "You stay close, no heroics." She met his eyes, the pull between autonomy and the safety he offered twisting like a knife. "I'm not here to hide. If that's a plant, it changes everything. You're vetting the manifests." Her voice held firm, but inside, fear gnawed. The Kittens back in her apartment, oblivious. Her life, once a quiet ledger of debts and strays, now entangled in his code of restraint amid chaos. Min-jun led them back up via a service stairwell, boots echoing on metal treads slick with condensation. The office felt altered upon re-entry, the rain-lashed windows now a backdrop to urgency, sodium lights from the street below painting the room in stark contrasts. Ji-hoon directed a spotlight toward the vent above the desk, its grill slightly askew, a millimeter off, but enough for his trained eye. Min-jun pried it open with a multi-tool, the screech of metal underscoring the tension, revealing a compact lens wired into the HVAC duct, its feed likely bouncing to an external relay. "Wireless nano cam," Min-jun muttered, snapping photos before extracting it with gloved hands. "Batteries fresh, installed within hours. No prints yet, but traces to a supplier in Chinatown. Triad favorite." He bagged it, then patched into the building system, cross-referencing access logs. A partial hit. An HVAC tech with falsified credentials had serviced the floor that afternoon. Badge swiped at 3:15 p.m. during a shift overlap Elara had noted in her guard rotation flags. Ji-hoon's fist clenched at his side, the legacy of his syndicate, built on vows to protect the innocent, never to let betrayal fester like his brother's death, clashing with the reality of infiltration. "Internal handoff," he said, voice low thunder. "That tech's one of ours, or was. Pull his file, family ties, debts." He paced to the window, the city sprawl a glittering web of potential threats. The Los Angeles River, a dark ribbon winding through it all. Turning to Elara, he added, "Your text warned of eyes. This confirms it. They're not just after roots. They're personal now." She crossed to the desk, pulling up the manifest on the screen, her fingers flying over the keys. The room's ozone hum mingled with the rain's patter, amplifying her unease. Look, cross-reference the van plates with that text address. San Gabriel Rental, same cluster. A behavioral tell. The man's overtime logs spiked the week her doc notes went out, subtle but damning. Human error or greed, ambition versus prudence tore at her. Stay independent, walk away from the wages that paid her bills, or dive deeper into his world, where loyalty was tested in fire. Minjun's radio crackled. Team on site at docks, drone down, operator fled on foot. No visuals, but perimeter breach attempted East Gate. Jihoon's response was immediate. Lock it down. We're moving. Convoy to the warehouse. Ilara comes. No room for debate, his code extending to her now, a protective vow forged in the moment. They descended to the garage in tense silence. The elevators were a countdown. 2 black SUVs idled, engines purring like predators, enforcers in tactical vests scanning the ramps. Ilara slid into the second vehicle with Ji-hoon, the door sealing them in a cocoon of leather and resolve. The convoy peeled out, tires hissing on wet pavement as they merged onto the 101, rain sheeting the windshield in relentless waves. Headlights cut through the blur, but in the mirrors, a distant pair of high beams lingered. Another tale, or phantom in the storm. The docks loomed on the horizon, a labyrinth of cranes and shipping containers stacked like metallic tombs under floodlights that buzzed against the downpour. Sodium lamps cast puddles in oily rainbows, the air heavy with salt, rust, and the low groan of moored vessels rocking on choppy waters. Ji-hoon's convoy breached the gates, guards waving them through with nods and radio checks, but tension coiled tighter. The east gate Ilara had flagged stood ajar, chain glinting wetly as if recently cut. They disembarked near the warehouse, a hulking structure of corrugated steel echoing with the rain's drumbeat. Inside, the space yawned vast, pallets of fish crates masking contraband, the scent of brine and diesel thick in the air. Minjun's team swept the perimeter, flashlights slicing shadows, while Ji-hoon led Ilara to the overseer's booth, a glassed-in perch overlooking the floor. "Stay here," he said, hand brushing her arm, a fleeting anchor amid the chaos. "Watch for anomalies." She nodded, heart hammering, but her eyes caught it first. A shipping manifest on the desk, ledger open to a page of discrepancies. Subtle tells, entries for precursor chemicals rerouted under innocuous codes, signed off by the same tech whose badge had failed. Partial discovery hit like a wave. The leak was organized, rivals using insiders to siphon routes, and her notes had poked the hornet's nest. But as shouts echoed from the far end, "Intruders! 2 on the catwalk!" The lights flickered, a blackout plunging the warehouse into strobing darkness from emergency backups. Gunfire cracked, muffled by the storm, enforcers returning fire toward the rafters where shadows darted. Ji-hoon drew a compact pistol from his coat, barking orders into his radio, his body shielding the booth instinctively. Ilara pressed against the glass, the world narrowing to pulses of light and the acrid bite of cordite seeping through vents. A figure broke from the gloom below, a turncoat guard, ledger in hand, bolting for a side exit. Rivals or betrayal? The environment turned hazardous, jammed doors from the sabotage, storm winds howling through a breached panel. Ji-hoon vaulted down the stairs, Minjun at his flank, the chase a blur of motion. Ilara's mind raced. Access code she'd balanced, now weapons. She keyed the overhead lights manually, flooding the space and pinning the runner. But in the revelation's wake, a cost loomed. The guard spun, firing wild, a bullet grazing Minjun's shoulder in a spray of red that bloomed dark on his vest. Victory edged closer, but at what price? And as sirens wailed distant from the river's edge, who had tipped the scales, and would the convoy extract them before the real storm broke? The warehouse plunged deeper into chaos. As the emergency lights stuttered back to full power, their harsh glare revealing the sprawl of crates like jagged sentinels in the downpour's roar. Rain hammered the corrugated roof overhead, a relentless percussion that drowned the echoes of gunfire, while the metallic tang of blood mingled with the brine-soaked air. Ilara gripped the booth's console, her knuckles white against the worn plastic, eyes locked on the fray below. Minjun slumped against a pallet, his good hand pressing a makeshift compress to the graze on his shoulder, dark blood seeping through the fabric. But his jaw set in grim determination, no cry of pain escaping. Ji-hoon moved like a shadow, detached from the storm, pistol steady as he pursued the turncoat guard toward the side exit, where the jammed door rattled futilely against the wind-whipped gale. "Flank him!" Ji-hoon barked into his radio, voice cutting through the static like a blade. His enforcers fanned out, boots splashing through shallow puddles that had seeped under the loading bay doors, their tack lights sweeping the catwalks above. The guard, the tech from the access logs, his face pale and twisted in desperation, clutched the ledger like a talisman, scrambling over a low stack of containers. He was no hardened operative. Sweat plastered his shirt to his back, his breaths ragged over the comms chatter. Ilara's mind raced through the ledgers she'd balanced. This man, coded as J. Lee in the rotations, had logged overtime correlating exactly with the van discrepancies. Greed or coercion? A debt to the triads, perhaps, trading syndicate secrets for a clean slate. From the booth, Ilara scanned the monitors, grainy feeds from perimeter cams showing the river's edge beyond the docks, black waves churning under sodium lights that flickered like dying fireflies. Sirens wailed closer now, a Doppler shift slicing the night, LAPD or Port Authority, drawn by the shots or an anonymous tip. Time compressed, the air thick with urgency, the hum of generators underscoring the fragility of their extraction. She keyed the override for the jammed door, fingers flying over the panel, access code from her manifests, a sequence she'd memorized to flag anomalies. The mechanism groaned, servos whining against sabotage, but it budged an inch, then two, admitting a howl of wind and spray. Down below, the guard reached the door, slamming his shoulder into it as Ilara's override engaged. He burst through, ledger flapping in the gusts, vanishing into the storm-lashed shadows of the container yard. Ji-hoon was seconds behind, rain sheeting off his coat as he emerged, enforcers piling out in a tight wedge. "Ilara, booth secure, get to the convoy." His shout carried over the gale, eyes locking on hers through the streaked glass, a flicker of raw concern breaking his iron facade. That code of his, never harm innocents, protect the circle, extended to her now, a vow tested by the bullet that had nicked Minjun, echoing the betrayal that claimed his brother years ago in a Busan dockside ambush. She didn't hesitate, bolting down the stairs, the metal treads slick under her shoes, heart pounding in sync with the thunder rumbling from the river. The warehouse floor was a maze of hazards, overturned crates spilling packing peanuts into the wind, loose chains rattling like warnings. Minjun waved her off from his position, radio pressed to his ear. "Go, I've got backup inbound, cover the boss." Blood loss slowed him, but his loyalty held. A human conflict etched in the lines of his face, ambition curbed by the syndicate's unyielding bond. Outside, the yard was a labyrinth of steel behemoths, containers stacked 10 high, their surfaces slick with rain that turned every step treacherous. Ilara sprinted toward the convoy SUVs, idling at the perimeter, engines growling against the storm, wipers slashing futilely at the deluge. But as she rounded a corner, headlights pierced the murk, a rival van, unmarked and aggressive, barreling from the East Gate's shadows, tires hydroplaning on the wet asphalt. Triad muscle, no doubt, drawn by the drone's feed or the guard's signal. It swerved toward the lead SUV, clipping its rear in a screech of metal, sparks flying like fireflies in the chaos. Ji-hoon appeared from the gloom, tackling the fleeing guard mid-stride, both men tumbling into a puddle that splashed up in icy arcs. The ledger skidded free, pages fluttering open to reveal highlighted entries, precursor shipments rerouted to a San Gabriel drop, her own flags circled in red ink. "Who sent you?" Ji-hoon growled, pinning the man with a knee to his chest, pistol trained steady despite the rain blurring his vision. The guard gasped, eyes wild. They know about her. The accountant said she'd pay the debt if I delivered her. Ilara froze mid-run, the words slicing through the wind. The van's doors flung open, 3 figures spilling out, hooded, armed with suppressed pistols, fanning toward the convoy in a botched escort turned ambush. Gunfire popped. Muffled cracks answered by the enforcer's return fire, bullets ricocheting off containers with metallic pings. One enforcer dropped, clutching his leg, the environment itself a foe, a sudden gust slamming a loose panel like a battering ram, forcing Ilara to dive behind a crate. The chill seeped through her clothes, mixing with adrenaline's burn, the river's roar mocking their peril. Ji-hoon hauled the guard up by his collar, disarming him with efficient brutality. No graphic strikes, just leverage and pressure points honed from years enforcing his restrained power. The Kittens, her place. They threatened that? The man's nod was frantic, a behavioral tell crumbling under fear. Partial discovery crystallized. The infiltration wasn't just roots. It targeted her vulnerabilities, the strays a leverage point in a world where autonomy clashed with the Syndicate's possessive shield. Ji-hoon's face darkened, legacy fueling rage, the past loss sharpening his resolve to safeguard what he'd claimed, even if unspoken. Sirens swelled, red and blue lights pulsing at the yard's edge, complicating the extraction. "Convoy, fall back! River tunnel!" Ji-hoon shoved the guard toward Minjun's arriving backup, then sprinted to Ilara's side, pulling her up with a grip that brooked no argument. They dashed to the second SUV, doors slamming as it lurched forward, tires spinning in the muck. The rival van pursued, but the enforcer's shot to its tire sent it fishtailing into a stack, metal groaning in collapse. Victory edged in, but the cost mounted. Minjun's wound, the exposed ledger, and now cops closing the noose. As the SUV barreled toward the service tunnel under the docks, a concrete vein snaking beneath the river, lit by flickering halogens and reeking of damp earth and oil. Ilara glanced back. The guard was cuffed, ledger secured, but the triad's interest in her burned hotter than the rain. Trust versus suspicion peaked. His protection felt like chains, yet walking away meant exposure. Ji-hoon's hand rested on the seat between them, a silent pledge amid the jolting ride. But in the rear view, a motorcycle weaved through the debris, helmeted rider, persistent. Was it the coffee shop shadow or a new player? And if the tunnel jammed like the warehouse door, would their convoy emerge intact or swallowed by the depths? The SUV barreled into the service tunnel beneath the Los Angeles River, its headlights carving jagged tunnels through the inky blackness, where the air hung heavy with the musty reek of stagnant water and corroded concrete. The tunnel's walls, slick with condensation and streaked with rust, blurred past in a claustrophobic rush, the engine's roar echoing off the low ceiling like a beast in chains. Ilara braced against the door, the jolt of potholes rattling her teeth, while Ji-hoon's driver gripped the wheel with white-knuckled focus, weaving around debris washed in from storm drains, twisted rebar and sodden pallets that threatened to snag the undercarriage. In the rear view, the motorcycle's single headlight bobbed like a pursuing spectre, its rider leaning into the curves with suicidal precision, rain from the grates above, sluicing down in intermittent sheets that turned the passage into a subterranean river. Ji-hoon's radio crackled, Min-jun's voice cutting through the static from the trailing enforcer van. Boss riders closing, plates burned, but it's a Kawasaki modded for speed, triad courier style. A pause, laced with pain from his shoulder wound. Tunnel exits 2 miles. Cops are bottlenecked at the yard, but if that bike slips ahead... The implication hung unspoken. A roadblock, A jam, or worse, an explosive diversion planted in the narrow vein. Ji-hoon leaned forward, his profile etched in the dashboard glow, jaw set like forged steel. Push it. No stops. He turned to Ilara, his hand still on the seat between them, a tether in the chaos. The possessiveness in his eyes warred with restraint, his code, a vow never to drag innocence into the fray, straining against the reality of her entanglement. The guard talked. They know about the kittens, your routine, leverage to flip you or me. His voice was low, edged with the gravel of old losses, the Busan betrayal that had carved restraint into his empire. Trust versus suspicion clawed at her. His protection felt like a gilded cage, yet the alternative, solitude amid rivals' eyes, chilled deeper than the tunnel's draft. Ilara's mind spun through the clues, the investigative thread pulling tighter. The ledger's pages, glimpsed in the yard's frenzy, had shown not just reroutes but a discreet entry. Her initials beside a consult fee for the tech's overtime, fabricated to implicate her as the leak. Human error? No. Deliberate, a plant to erode Ji-hoon's faith, turning her from asset to liability. That manifest, she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline's tremor. The codes I balanced. They matched the tech's burner pings. Someone in your network fed them my files, post-flag. Her independence flared, a push against his world. She'd accepted the wages for survival, not to become a pawn in faction wars, but curiosity and moral duty bound her now, the kittens' fragile lives a symbolic anchor. The driver cursed under his breath as the motorcycle surged closer, its engine whine piercing the din, weaving perilously near the rear bumper. A muffled pop echoed. Suppressed shot, glancing off the SUV's armored flank with a spark that lit the mirrors. The convoy swerved, the enforcer van behind returning fire through tinted glass, bullets ricocheting off the walls in a deadly pinball. The environment turned lethal, a sudden flood from an overhead grate cascaded down, turning the lane into a slick hazard, hydroplaning the SUV into a spin that scraped sparks from the concrete. Ji-hoon braced her shoulder, his touch firm but unyielding, the scent of wet leather and cordite filling the cab. "Exit ramp ahead," the driver barked, wrenching the wheel as halogen lights flickered at the tunnel's end, revealing a grated incline rising to the river's industrial fringe, warehouses and rail spurs shrouded in storm fog. But the motorcycle overtook, rider kicking a debris pallet into their path, forcing a hard brake that slung Ilara forward. The bike skidded to block the ramp, helmeted figure dismounting with fluid grace, pistol raised in the downpour that sheeted from the grates like a veil. Ji-hoon kicked open his door before the SUV fully stopped, enforcers piling out in a wedge, their suppressed weapons trained. "Stand down!" he commanded, voice booming over the gale, rain plastering his shirt to his frame. The rider hesitated, visor reflecting the chaos, a subtle tell in the tilt of the shoulders, nervous, not fanatic. No triad ink visible, just a gloved hand twitching toward a pocket radio. Partial discovery hit, not a hitman, but a scout relaying positions for a larger play. "Who pays you?" Ji-hoon pressed, advancing with measured steps, his pistol low but ready, the code holding him from first blood. The rider bolted for the shadows of a railcar, but Min-jun's van screeched up, blocking escape. A tackle brought the figure down in a splash of mud and gravel, helmet cracking against the ground. Ilara emerged cautiously, the chill wind off the river biting through her soaked clothes, carrying the briny tang of the channel and distant foghorns. The rider, a wiry man in his 30s, face scarred from old knife work, spat water, eyes darting. Not triads, freelance. "Your tech hired me, said the woman's the key. Spill the ledgers, get the payout." Her. Again. Ilara's stomach knotted, the threat organized and personal, rivals circling her quiet life like vultures. The man's pocket yielded a burner phone, screen lighting with a recent text. Extract Voss, Kittens bait. Warehouse clear. The Kittens, left in her apartment, are vulnerable to a staged break-in or worse. Autonomy shattered, financial need had drawn her in, but now gratitude twisted into reliance on Ji-hoon's shield. Sirens pierced the fog, closing from the east, red-blue strobes dancing off the water like fractured warnings. Ji-hoon hauled the rider up, cuffing him to Min-jun's backup. Secure him, we're ghosts out. The convoy reformed, peeling onto a service road lined with chain link and sodium lamps, buzzing in the drizzle. But as they merged into the sprawl, Ilara spotted it in the side mirror, a black sedan, unmarked, idling at the tunnel mouth. False alarm, or the real tale slipping through? Ji-hoon's hand found hers briefly, a pledge amid the pull, loyalty forged in the depths, but at the cost of exposure. Back at her apartment, would the strays be safe, or had the infiltration already claimed its first innocent prize? If this tale already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more hidden stories to light. The service road twisted through the industrial sprawl east of the river, a vein of cracked asphalt flanked by looming silos and chain-link fences rattling in the wind's dying gusts. The SUV's tires hummed over puddles that reflected the sodium lamp's jaundiced glow. The rain easing to a persistent mist that beaded on the windows like reluctant tears. Ilara sat rigid in the back, her soaked clothes clinging cold to her skin, the briny chill from the tunnel lingering in her nostrils, alongside the faint, coppery whiff of adrenaline-fueled sweat. Ji-hoon's profile cut sharp against the passing shadows, his breathing steady but measured. One hand resting on his knee where the pistol had been holstered, out of sight, but its weight echoed in the confined space. The black sedan in the mirror held pace at a distance, its headlights dimmed to slits, blending with the sparse traffic of late-night haulers rumbling toward the ports. Not aggressive, but persistent. A watcher, perhaps relaying their vector to unseen handlers. Ji-hoon's driver glanced back once, then accelerated subtly, merging onto the 10 freeway's underlit expanse where semis loomed like iron behemoths. "Clean so far," the man said, voice gravel over the engine's low growl. "But that sedan's Echo Park plates, same cluster as the tech's rental." Ji-hoon nodded, pulling out his phone to tap a secure line. Min-jun answered on the first ring, his tone laced with the strain of his wound. "Backup's patching me up at the safe house. Riders spilling. Freelancer paid by a middleman in San Gabriel. Points to a splinter cell. Not full triad. They want the Voss woman's access codes. Think she's the weak link in the manifests." Ilara's fingers dug into the leather seat, the pull between fear and fury twisting tighter. Her apartment, the Kittens, tiny vulnerabilities in a world of calculated strikes. "They mentioned bait," she said, voice cutting the hum, "if they've hit my place." Autonomy clashed with the gratitude she'd felt for his wages, now soured by entanglement. She'd balanced his ledgers for survival, not to draw shadows into her quiet corners, but moral duty pinned her here, the strays a mirror to her own frayed edges. Ji-hoon's eyes met hers in the reflection, dark and unyielding, the possessiveness there restrained by his code, no innocence shattered, no debts left unpaid. A past loss flickered in his gaze, the brother taken by betrayal's blade, shaping his restraint into armor. "My team's en route to your building. Discreet entry, full sweep. If they're there, we end it clean." He ended the call, the phone's screen casting a blue pallor over his features. The freeway curved, the city lights smearing into streaks, the distant wail of sirens, a fading echo from the docks. They veered off at Western Avenue, the familiar neon haze of Koreatown materializing like a half-remembered dream, sizzling street food carts steaming under awnings, the acrid bite of exhaust mingling with jasmine from corner markets. Ilara's building loomed ahead, its laundromat windows dark now, the exterior stairs slick with runoff. The SUV idled at the curb, engine purring softly, while Ji-hoon's enforcers fanned out from a trailing van, two shadows melting into alleys, radios whispering static. "Stay here," Ji-hoon said, hand on the door latch, but she was already unbuckling, the chill air hitting her as she stepped out. "No, it's my place." Suspicion warred with trust. His world offered protection, but at the cost of her independence, a push-pull that left her exposed either way. He didn't argue, just nodded once, the ghost of a vow in the set of his jaw. They ascended the stairs together, boots quiet on the wet metal, the door's deadbolt yielding to her key with a familiar click. Inside, the apartment felt violated before they saw it, the air stale, the faint mew of distress from the kitchenette cutting the silence like a blade. The Kittens box lay overturned on the linoleum, tiny forms huddled in a corner, fur matted but alive, saucer of milk tipped and congealing. No overt damage, but drawers ajar, her laptop bag rifled, subtle tells of a search, not destruction. Ji-hoon's enforcer radioed from downstairs. Sedans circling the block. No approach. Watching. He swept the room methodically, gloved hand lifting cushions, checking vents, the ozone hum of her old fridge underscoring the tension. Ilara knelt by the Kittens, scooping the grey one, the bold sniffer into her palm, its tremor easing against her warmth. Relief flooded, but it soured quick, a burner phone on the counter once she hadn't left. Screen lit with a single message. "We know what you flagged. Deliver the full manifests, or the strays don't make dawn. Drop at the old rail yard, 3 a.m. Her breath caught, the words a credible confirmation, organized, leveraging her soft spots. The tech's betrayal had rippled here, human error amplified by rival ambition, turning her routine into a pressure point. Ji-hoon read over her shoulder, his presence a solid wall at her back. "It's a setup. Rail yard's triad neutral ground, ambush waiting." His voice held the weight of decisions past, loyalty tested by external blades. "We flip it. You and I go in. Wired. My team shadows." Ilara set the kitten down, rising to face him, green eyes fierce in the dim light filtering through blinds. "And if it's internal, your code, does it cover turning on your own?" The question hung, probing the fracture, his restrained power versus the fear of another Busan echo, her ethics clashing with the syndicate's unyielding grip. He stepped closer, the space between them electric, rain pattering the window like impatient fingers. "It covers you now. Vows kept, no matter the cost." The pledge landed heavy, symbolic of transformation, material wages paling against the loyalty budding in the ruins. But as his phone buzzed with Minjun's update, sedans peeling off but drone signature near the yard, the black sedan's retreat felt too clean. Was it a diversion, drawing them to the rail yard while another play unfolded here? And if they walked into the trap, would the true treasure, trust forged in the night, survive the dawn's light? The rail yard sprawled like a skeletal graveyard under the pre-dawn mist, rusted tracks snaking between derelict freight cars and overgrown weeds that whispered against the chain-link perimeter. The air hung thick with the oily scent of creosote and damp earth, the distant hum of the 10 freeway, a low thrum underscoring the isolation. Sodium lamps buzzed sporadically along the fence, casting elongated shadows that danced with the wind's fitful gusts, turning every corner into a potential ambush point. Ilara's breath fogged in the chill as she and Ji-hoon approached on foot from the service access, their steps muffled on the gravel, wired earpieces linking them to the shadows, Minjun's team circling wide, drones humming silently overhead for aerial eyes. Ji-hoon's hand brushed hers in the dark, a silent anchor amid the pull of his world, his coat shedding the last beads of earlier rain. "Drops at the old signal tower," he murmured, voice a gravel edge over the comms. "You carry the drive, fake manifests, rigged to trace. They bite, we tag 'em." His code thrummed beneath the words, restraint in the face of betrayal, a vow to shield her without shattering innocence, forged from the Busan scar that still ached in quiet moments. But suspicion lingered in her chest. His possessiveness a velvet chain, her autonomy fraying under the weight of threats that had invaded her kitten's mules and modest ledgers. She nodded, the USB drive heavy in her pocket, its data a web of planted inconsistencies designed to lure the middleman. The burner phone's message burned in her mind. Deliver the full manifests, or the strays don't make dawn. Organized malice, leveraging her soft edges, the strays her independence against the syndicate's iron grip. Human conflict twisted sharper. Gratitude for his protection warred with the fear of becoming another asset in his empire, loyalty tested by the possibility of internal rot. "If it's one of yours," she whispered, eyes scanning a freight car where moonlight glinted off fresh scratches on the lock, tampered a subtle tell. "What then?" "Then we cut it out," he replied, terse. As they neared the tower, a skeletal spire of faded red paint and tangled wires, its base littered with shattered glass that crunched underfoot. The mist thickened, carrying the faint, acrid tang of exhaust from an idling vehicle hidden in the yard's depths. Comms crackled softly. Min-jun, voice strained but steady from his patched wound. 2 heat signatures east side, freelancers, armed light. Drone confirms no backup yet. Ilara placed the drive on the rusted pedestal as instructed, the clink echoing like a summons. Retreat to cover, a derelict caboose, its door ajar with the groan of warped metal. And they waited, hearts sinking to the wind's howl through the rails. Minutes stretched, tension coiling like the tracks ahead. Then footsteps, 2 figures emerging from the fog. Silhouettes low and cautious, one clutching a satchel, the other sweeping a flashlight beam that sliced the gloom. "Got it?" the first grunted, voice accented with San Gabriel grit, snatching the drive. Ilara's earpiece buzzed, trace active, signal pinging to a burner relay in the shadows, but the second figure paused, beam catching her shoe's edge through a crack in the caboose wall. "Wait, eyes on the drop." "She's here." Chaos erupted without warning. The flashlight swung wide, a suppressed pop shattering the quiet, bullet embedding in the caboose's side with a dull thunk, splintering wood inches from Ilara's face. Ji-hoon fired back, controlled bursts pinning the pair behind a rail car, the acrid bite of cordite mingling with the mist. "Move! Flank left!" he ordered over comms, pulling her toward the tracks as enforcers closed from the perimeter, shadows converging like a noose. The yard turned hazardous, environment complicit, a sudden gust slamming a loose panel from an overhead catwalk, forcing them to dive into gravel that bit through clothes. The first freelancer bolted, satchel flapping, but tripped a hidden wire, guard rotation tell from her manifests. A silent alarm she'd flagged weeks ago, now repurposed. Lights flooded the yard, harsh and blinding, exposing the runners. Min-jun's team tackled them, zip ties snapping in the fray, but the second figure lunged at Ji-hoon, knife glinting in a desperate arc. Ilara acted on instinct, kicking a loose rail tie into his path, human error amplified into leverage, the man sprawling with a curse. Ji-hoon subdued him with a precise hold, no excess force, pistol pressing just enough to demand surrender. "Who runs you?" he growled, the freelancer's face twisting in the glare. "Middleman, tech's boss, splinter cell, not full triad. Wanted her codes to bleed your roots dry. Kittens were just the hook, thought she'd crack." Revelation crashed like the wind, the threat real. Organized from within the fringes, a betrayal born of greed and old grievances resurfacing. The tech had sold them out for a cut, fabricating her implication to cover tracks, but her flags had unraveled it all. Victory came sharp, but with cost. Min-jun's team radioed an enforcer down, leg shattered in the panel's fall, exposure rippling as sirens wailed from the freeway, drawn by the lights. Ji-hoon's empire scarred, but intact, the ledger's secret secured in the satchel now in Min-jun's hands. As dawn bled grey over the yard, the mist lifting to reveal the river's sluggish flow beyond, Ji-hoon turned to Ilara, his hand finding hers amid the settling dust. Bruises bloomed on his knuckles, a faint cut above his eye from the scuffle. But his gaze held steady, revelation's true treasure. Protection earned, trust forged in the night's crucible. "You're out if you want," he said, voice low over the enforcer's cleanup. "Wages cleared, no strings. But my code, it sees you now. Stay, and it's us, against whatever comes." She squeezed his hand, the push-pull resolving in the chill air, autonomy bending to chosen loyalty. The kittens waited, safe under guard, a found family mirroring the one budding here, his restrained power, her sharp ethics intertwined. No grand spoils, just the pledge, a future together, believable in the scars they'd share. Weeks later, in the quiet of her apartment, now with reinforced locks and a corner basket for the thriving litter, Ilara balanced a new ledger. Ji-hoon's operations streamlined, rivals scattered by the raid's fallout. The adventure's echo lingered in shared glances over coffee, memories outlasting the raw power of his world. Loyalty, not ledgers, had transformed them. Chosen family, enduring where empires faltered. The city hummed outside, but inside, the mules and his steady presence wove a bond unbreakable, the true legacy of the night. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of loyalty, danger, and found family. See you in the next story.